Hello there. What is going on, everybody? We are at a double critical season finale. It is the final episode of season 2, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what that means. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today, and some of the holiday plans that are coming up, and some things that you can look forward to. We're almost at the 50,000 subscriber mark, so that is also pretty exciting. So we've got a lot of interesting little details to talk about. So I hope you guys are doing well tonight. What's going on, Timothy Barabbas, and what's going on, Haydenius? You guys, if you're here, if you're in chat, if you're watching, give us a shout out. We'll try to get some interactive stuff going on tonight, because the theme is Armada, but particularly Star Trek Armada, what I call the dream game. I thought this would be a cool way to kind of round out season 2. We're going to be discussing what the dream game could be, because I've always said that Armada felt like it should have been Star Trek all along. So why is this the season finale? Well, we're getting close to holiday time. There's going to be a lot more family weekends and things like that. And it's been, I think some of the demands on my time have been growing lately. I was traveling this past week, and so if you guys caught some of my recent videos, I was out in Texas, so I'm back home now. So if you notice, some of the scenery and things like that are a little different, but there's going to be more of those of those weekends coming up where there's things going on, whether it's Thanksgiving, Christmas time, other holiday time, and there's just a lot of family and types of events like that are going to be coming up, and I feel like this is probably a good point to sort of wind down the season and potentially. We're also kind of at a lull for content. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to be putting out content as much anymore, but I'm just going to be taking a little break from doing double critical. There was a big break in between seasons 1 and seasons 2, and there was a big difference in those two different seasons. And one of the main differences is season 1 I had a guest every time, and season 2 was just me and you guys. So I went without guests for season 2. And also with season 2, we sort of kicked it up a notch and talked about multiple different games, because season 1 was just Star Wars Legion, and season 2 we sort of talked about a lot more of the games. Hence, with today's episode being our kind of Armada based, but we're kind of kicking it up a little bit of a notch higher. As far as this being more of a hypothetical game rather than just a hypothetical mechanic or theory crafting for a specific game. This is theory crafting for an all-new game. What's going on, Jonathan? We got Big Ben checking in. We got Jonathan from Australia. We got Craig from the UK, and at 88 miles per hour says he used to play Star Trek Attack Wing and wish Armada was the game that WizKids licensed for it instead. Yes, I understand that. That would be pretty cool. Who knows? Alex Davey is over at WizKids, so maybe some of the things that we love and we hope for will eventually make their way to our tabletops. Jorge Hidalgo says, I'm in Rebels in the Armada, but I want to get into a different faction. My options are Empire or the Republic. Well, you also have the Separatists, too, but maybe you just don't particularly like them. Honestly, Empire is going to have a lot more going for it right now. There's a lot more options. There's a lot more ships. There's a lot more fleets, a lot more commanders, a lot more everything for the Galactic Civil War factions. So that's definitely something to consider. So we're closing in on 50,000 subscribers, so stay tuned. This week we're going to be announcing the end of the winner of the most recent $25 Amazon gift card giveaway. Also going to be announcing the next giveaway. This one is going to be special. If you heard in my video this morning, I'm going to be doing a bigger giveaway for 50,000. This one is going to be much larger and will run for a longer period of time. I think I will probably have it run until maybe until Christmas, but that doesn't mean that that's the only giveaway. We'll be doing giveaways in the we'll be doing. Actually, as a matter of fact, we can do a giveaway in this video too. We'll do an Armada giveaway in this particular stream for an Imperial 1 class Star Destroyer. Bum, 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 bum. So, oh man, look at that. Now, I promise you this. It does not have holes where the laser blasts should be in the card. There are no holes in the card. It's just I'm not really on the bridge of a Star Destroyer. This is a green screen, right? So when there's green on a card, it shows up through it. So that's cool. If you notice, my face is not showing up behind it. So that's pretty groovy, right? So we'll be giving away an Imperial 1 class Star Destroyer. We'll be telling you how you can get that at the end of the stream. So I'm going to set that down right in front of me. And so we'll do some giveaways, and we always have giveaways going on from time to time. So that is always a very fun thing. All right, we got more people joining us here. We're getting things going, which is definitely very exciting. How many of you guys are fans of like 1980s cartoons? There's been like a big resurgence in 1980s cartoons lately. I'm a very big Thundercats fan, and so I wonder if we got anybody who has ever watched Thundercats in the audience tonight, because there is the game Zombicide has like a Thundercats expansion that's going to be coming out at some point, probably next year, and I actually just ordered some of the new Super 7 Ultimates Thundercats. These are collectible action figures, but I'll be reviewing some of those this coming week also. Oh wow, all right. I loved Mask, but Thundercats was cool too. Mask was pretty cool. I didn't have as many Mask toys growing up. I had the motorcycle guy, the dude with the yellow, but he was on the green motorcycle that turned into a helicopter. I thought that was actually pretty cool. I missed Thundercats by a few years. That's all right. It was still a good show. We were all naked in the first episode, by the way. That was always a weird thing. Anybody who has ever watched all of Thundercats would always. I remember all the kids were like, when I was young and I'd be talking to other kids at school, we would be like, "Dude, did you ever watch the first episode?" And we're like, "Yeah, dude, were they all naked on yours too?" "Yeah, they were naked on mine." "What? Were we allowed to watch that?" I don't know if that was supposed to be that way. 88 miles per hour says Trek's issue is there aren't enough fighters, only shuttles and runabouts. Well, I don't know if that's necessarily an issue. So let's talk about Star Trek Armada, because kind of it's the game that Armada should have been, and so I had done some theory crafting on how you would do like a dream Star Trek game, and while a lot of it is, and I want to talk to you guys about some of the things that I have come up with for tonight, and I want to get kind of your feedback on it, because I have a couple of like differences, like major differences from the way Armada is right now, and and if I were to design a Star Trek game, here's kind of how it would be. Of course, it would largely be Armada. You could kind of use that as a starting point. One of the things like that I would keep very similar is kind of like the range ruler, right? You'd have your 3 ranges. I actually put 4 ranges on my range ruler. You still have the main 3, but you have a small little section at the tip, and that's like a range 4, and that's scanning range. So like they're outside of weapons range, but you can still scan them, and that allows for support ships to have different things that they can potentially do at scanning range. It allows for every ship can potentially do things at scanning range, but it opens up a whole new faculty for the game for other ships to be able to support the fleet by doing things other than shooting. I don't imagine that a Star Trek Armada game would have very many squadrons in it. I think there's still room for it to have some, but I think it would truly be a game that's more focused on ship-to-ship combat. And while you could have little fighter groups, that would be kind of an optional thing. Maybe you'd see one build at every tournament that was running fighters, or maybe 2 builds that was running fighters. And it would be a possibility. It might require a fleet to actually support them pretty well, but I think I would definitely want it to be more focused on the ships. So let's talk about the range ruler, because that's one of the things I want to talk about a little bit first. So you've got close range. Instead of it being ordnance or torpedoes, I actually have them. I have that kind of flip-flops. I have the torpedoes going to long range, because in Star Trek, their torpedoes go out really, really far. So I have range 1 being cannons, so like pulse cannons, like the Defiant has those like those forward firing cannons. Birds of Prey, Klingon Birds of Prey have forward firing like pulse cannons, right? So I'd have that be your range 1. Range 2 would be phasers. Phasers are, seem like they're the blue dice attacks that would work, and then your cannons being closest range might have like kind of like Armada's black dice. Range 3 would be torpedoes. Those could kind of be like your red dice, but those wouldn't necessarily appear in every arc. And so that's one of the things, is not everybody would have those long range attacks, or not that many of those long range attacks. So while you could do kind of torpedo based builds, a lot of ships only have torpedoes facing forward and backward. And of course you could put anything else that happens to be happen to have extra long range ships, and you could give them red dice for that. So there could be broadside ships for sure. But I think a lot of the sweet spot for combat for Star Trek would be for Star Trek Armada would be in medium range, in that phaser range. So what would be the main factions for the? Oh man, I've got slides. I've got a lot of notes typed up for this one, because I actually spent a lot of time working on like plans and things like that for a Star Trek Armada. And so I just but I'm keeping most of it kind of conceptual, right? And so I think, I think there's a lot of really cool things. We got a lot of folks, here in chat with us tonight. What's going on, everybody? What you really need is a hybrid of X-Wing, Attack Wing, and Armada. Maybe. I mean, that's, there's some cool things about the way Attack Wing did stuff. Like, I thought it was really cool that you had, first off, that they got ships on the, on the board, like that they did so much, and there was an awful lot. I actually don't. The one thing I think it might be a little bit problematic, and again, it doesn't have to be this way, but this is one of my ideas, is that we go without crew, right? That we go without having all these different, like, if you have the Enterprise, for example, you don't necessarily have to have like a Geordi LaForge card and a Commander Riker card and a Data card and a Captain Picard card, right? Because to me, that's a game that's based off of Star Trek: The Next Generation, where the stories were more, or classic Trek, or, the stories, or Voyager even, where the stories were a lot more about, what was going on board one ship, and then your combat was like one ship versus one ship, or maybe one versus two. I want a fleet-based game. And so for me, I think the concept, the core idea of the game should come more from like the Dominion War. From a lot of the Deep Space Nine episodes where we see large-scale warfare. I think that's kind of should be your starting point. And I think that's something, if you're sitting down to design a new game, I think you need to ask yourself, like, what's their target audience here? What kind of feel are we trying to capture? Especially if it's a licensed game. Like, what's the setting? What's our inspiration? What factions we're going to do, how are we going to do the miniatures and all of that stuff, and what new mechanics are we going to have? So my setting is kind of like that. It's almost like a Kobayashi Maru type battle simulator, and that's kind of how you justify all of these things. And maybe we call it Star Trek War Room, right? And it's basically like a battle simulator, kind of like how that Kobayashi Maru scenario was, where but instead of just being on board one ship, you're leading a whole fleet. And so the focus is more on the individual ships and less on the individual people and components on each ship. So I would lean a little bit more into the way Marvel Crisis Protocol has their heroes, in that you would have like ships that just have all of the stuff that they're going to have on them, because especially in the case of the Federation has so many ships. I don't know if we really need a million customization options for the Federation, and a quarter of that for every other faction. So I would love to have like the ship cards be a little bigger than this, but have all of the special abilities that they have on them written on them. But I would also take a page from Armada as it is right now and have things be double-sided, right? And potentially even more than that. Maybe more like the Imperial Star Destroyer for some ships. Some ships would have only 2 sides, where other ships might have 4 sides. I think for some of the other factions, and we'll talk about factions. And Hayden says, I like that idea more than having 20,000, 200,000 crew, or 20,000. Yeah. Mathis Flipsy says, I think you should at least be able to have a captain. Yeah, no, I think that's definitely a possibility. And I'm not going to rule out being able to put, a recognizable character in charge of your fleet. That would be your fleet admiral. And so you would have a fleet admiral that you could put on a flagship, and done. And that's it. Right? Like, you have one upgrade card, and it's your fleet admiral. And that's it. That's the only thing you have to worry about. And I think that really is cool. It gives you a lot of other ways to customize your fleet without having to worry too much. And you can still get a lot of those recognizable crew in there, those recognizable people in there, but you wouldn't get too far down into it. Like, I don't think you would have like Barclay as your fleet commander for the Federation. But, you start off with like looking at like 6 or 8, for the big factions, and I think the big factions, the ones you start out with at least, are going to be Klingons, Romulans, and the Federation. And then, of course, you can kind of go a little bit farther into like Cardassia and Bajor, and of course the Dominion, and even the Borg. And I think you need to look at what's the biggest ship you'd ever want to do, what's the most obscene expansion you would ever want to do, and then scale the game such that would potentially fit in it. Which means I think you should scale the game such that a Borg cube can work, even if you're not designing a Borg cube for the first wave, or 2, or 3, or 4. So you should scale the game as such that a Deep Space Nine space station would work, even if you're not planning to do that. Now, if you want to go, for the X-Wing scale, that might not, I don't know. I don't think that's going to do it. I think you need to kind of model your game a little bit more off of Armada, and also have the ships kind of in scale with each other a little bit more. That was one of my problems with Attack Wing, was that like everything looked like they didn't reference any of the other ships when they made it. So you had something like the Constitution class, Enterprise, which was almost the same size as a Galaxy class starship, and then you had like the Defiant, which was bigger than certain other ships that it was actually smaller than, and so like just weird things like that just didn't mesh well with me. Now, there's definitely a lot of stuff that you could do, like as far as miniatures. You could do them pre-painted. They'd probably have more appeal if you had pre-painted miniatures. And I guess this depends on who's going to do your production, manufacturing, and stuff like that, and who you're partnering with. So, like that one's, I think it's better if you can have them pre-painted as an option. But then again, it might, it would probably be a lot more cost effective to have them come on frames or sprues or something to that effect. We got a super chat. What's going on, Levi Davidson? What is going on? Levi has a question. Thank you for the support, Levi. Thank you for the super chat. I appreciate you showing some support for the channel. Rock and roll. Levi asks, is there a way to homebrew a Lancer class frigate? Well, there's a lot of ways to do that. And it depends on what you want to do and who you want to play against. So there's Quat Drive Yards, which has a lot of ways to kind of create your own ship, and you can also view a lot of the other ship cards and stuff that have been created by other community members. So that's definitely something that you can do. What I would recommend is, since there are already so many mechanics that have been designed for the game, that you pick a ship it's kind of close to, maybe a Raider Corvette, something to that design, maybe an Architons, or something along those lines, and you go ahead and basically get the miniature from Mel's Miniatures. Right? They look up Mel's Miniatures on Shapeways. There's just about everything for X-Wing Armada and even Legion stuff that you could think of. He's got something for, but he's got a lot of Armada ships, and they all go on the bases and stuff, and they're all like perfect, custom sized to work with Armada. So this way you get your miniature there, and then so you like a really good way to do it is just put a miniature on that Raider base, but still run the Raider's stats. So effectively, you're really just running a Raider, but for you, it's a Lancer class frigate, right? Or something to that effect. Like, that's what I tell a lot of people who are looking to do, for example, the Rebels didn't have the Quasar, right? But in the show Star Wars Rebels, they had the Quasar. They had that they stole a Quasar. And so, what if you want the Rebels to be able to run a Quasar like in the show? Well, just take a Quasar and put it on an Assault Frigate Mark II base. This way, as far as game balance is concerned, you're running an Assault Frigate Mark II. But thematically, it's a Quasar. You still use the Assault Frigate Mark II's stats and defense tokens and maneuver chart and upgrades and all of that stuff. But thematically, you can pretend. And of course, you have to make sure your opponent is okay with that too. And I wouldn't do it in a tournament, but for casual play, I think that's a great way to go. This way, you're still running the stats, and you're still playing the game that's been balanced for a certain type of gameplay, but you're also able to kind of add in all of the fun type of stuff that you would like. That's what I would suggest. All right. Okay, most of the ships, Gavin says, most of the ships, going back to Star Trek, now, it would be easy to pre-paint. The Romulans and Klingons are mostly just green with yellow lights. Yeah, that's a fact. Some of them wouldn't really be that hard. I think some of the difficulty would come into the game is when you look at things like the Federation ships and in trying to get like NCC 1701D on the saucer section of a Galaxy class starship, you're going to have a hard time trying to do that. And so then people are going to have to use stencils and stuff like that, or decals. And so maybe that's what you do is maybe if they're going to come unpainted, you give them the decals, right? Maybe that's exactly what you do. You include decals with them. That would be pretty cool. That would be pretty cool. All right. So I want to throw out my first big change. Well, I guess having a range 4 on our range ruler that's for scanning is kind of a big change, right? And scanning might be something as simple as it can give some kind of a token to other ships nearby it, or maybe it gives or maybe it gives you information, right, about the enemy ship, and that factors into gameplay somehow. Or maybe there's certain ships maybe scanning is an action, right? Since we're probably not going to have much in the way of squadrons, maybe scanning is a command that everybody can do. So there's a lot of things you can do with like a fourth range option on your range ruler that is for scanning. But I like the idea of ships that are like not in weapons range yet, but they still are able to get information on you. Plus, you could and that could work into like a campaign stuff too. Maybe you have to hail the station, opening hailing frequencies. A lot of that stuff is done sometimes, and it's a pretty cool thing. Also, another thing about the range 1, the close range, the black dice, which for your cannons, those could also be transporter range. So if somebody's shields are down, then you can beam a boarding party over, and that can be another action that you might take. So I think that's a really cool, fun thing to do. Is we don't have much of that in Armada. There's a little bit, like you can potentially bring, some like one boarding team that you get to, but I like the idea of just general having boarding parties, and maybe certain factions work better with that. Maybe some commanders work better with that. Klingons would be really good for stuff like that. Heck, the Dominion would be good stuff, sending the Jem'Hadar over and things like that. I think you'd also have non-aligned ships. I think you'd have like basically mercenary ships that could go into any faction or stuff. There's so many one-off ships that are also really, really cool that I think it'd be fun to be able to put, loner ships into a fleet that would also help balance out like Klingon and Romulan fleets that like Romulans. How many people running Romulans would have a fleet that's almost all D'Deridex class warbirds, right? Like they'd almost all look like that. So you kind of want to have some other things like, well, the Romulans have a Borg ship. Wait, how did this happen? You'd probably have allowances for things like that. So I want to talk about shields a little bit because in Star Trek, there's 6 hull zones. As opposed to in Star Wars Armada, how every ship has 4. Well, most ships have 4. Right? The SSD has 6. But in Star Trek, in addition to having forward shields, aft shields, and port and starboard shields, they also have dorsal and ventral shields. You have shields directly above the ship and shields directly below the ship also. And I want to make that work in Star Trek, right? And so here's an idea on how to make that work. First off, if you're making this for a whole different company, you might not be able to do, the exact dial system the way they are in Armada. But you come up with another way to mark the shields that are on the top and the bottom. Maybe use dice for that or something. But what I would like to do is basically you have shields on the top and the bottom, but you treat you treat your left and right stuff the same way you do, and you still have redirect like defense tokens and things like that. No problem there. But I want to consider this having bases. Here's the ship and here's the stand that it goes on. What if the stands had a hinge, right? They went like 45 degrees, like that. Now, when you're doing a maneuver, you can alter your ship's kind of yaw. Yaw isn't the one, bearing or whatever. Basically, you can turn your ship like from straight up to sideways, or from sideways to straight up, or the other way, right? That, right? And when you do that, your top shield becomes your right shield, and your bottom shield becomes your left shield, or vice versa if you go the other way. And so now all of a sudden, like, you're rolling to kind of spread damage out. I think that would be a really, really cool thing. Now, it would be difficult to manufacture, little hinges for every ship type base that exists, but I think that would be like a really fun thing to be able to do with your ship. So that's a cool idea that I think that would be fun to see something like that show up. But I have a different idea. Like, if that's not going to work, I have a whole different idea, and it's something I call battle groups. And this to me, this seems like this would be incompatible with the hinged base sort of idea. So because it'd be too different. It would basically be like using instead of you just putting ships out, instead of having a single ship on a base, what if every ship could be part of a battle group? And so instead of individual ships, you're running battle groups, and a battle group is effectively kind of like a flotilla, but it has more than just two. So it has like 3 or 4 basically sized battle groups, and you point cost those battle groups. Think of like the squadron base, right? It's got the 3, like the candelabra. For every ship you put into that battle group, that's how much you get your points. Now, it turns out Drop Fleet Commander does this too, and I didn't steal this idea from Drop Fleet Commander, but it ends up being, because I had written this down before I had ever looked at Drop Fleet Commander. So it was something that I had thought of for a while, but so my idea, my implementation of it is slightly different, because you'd have to do a specific number, right? Like if you were running a 3 ship battle group, you'd have to run 3 ships, and they basically come like 2, 3, 4, and 5, for their different for the bases. You'd have to fill them out, and if you ran like certain combinations of ships, you might get bonuses, right? Like if you ran like all nebulas, maybe you'd get some kind of bonus for that. But the cool thing about it is maybe you would assign those at the beginning of the game, and so like you're kind of, because there's another, like a core component to a game that is really, really fun to me, and it's the idea that you're having fun from the very first minute of the game. And I play Star Wars Rebellion an awful lot. It's one of my most played games of all. And in Star Wars Rebellion, it's fun from the very beginning when you're setting up and deploying and kind of setting up how you're going to play, and the rebels are picking where the rebel base is going to be, and like the rebel player is just like, all right, how's this going to be different? How am I going to mind game this person? Where is the base going to be? And that's going to affect the whole way that I play. Right. So from the very beginning, before the first turn has been taken, you're already having fun, and you're getting into it, and you're having a good time, and it really gives you this cool element of fun factor. And I think in the case of miniatures games, a really cool element of fun factor is the miniatures themselves. And so if you're assigning battle groups and be like, all right, I'm going to have, a sovereign class leading 2 Oberths, for like this strike group. And then I'm going to have 2 nebulas over here, and they're going to have an Excelsior class with them, and then on the other side is like, all right, I'm going to have my Vorcha with 2 Cavort birds of prey, or something like that for the, and kind of building out those battle groups in like a really cool formation that looks cool and feels thematic. could be a really fun thing before the first turn even happens, when you're just kind of assigning those battle groups and putting them down where you want them to be, and making your battle groups look the way they want to look. And that would basically be where battle groups did attacks. And that would be, and if you were going to do that, I don't think that would be compatible with the ships doing their individual roles. So it kind of depends on if you want to do individual ships more like Armada, or if you want to control groups of ships at a time. And that would scale your game down a little bit more. And that would allow for really massive battles of 20 or 30 ships on a side, because maybe if you're running 5 ship battle groups, that's only going to be 6 activations as opposed to 30 activations, right? So there's a lot of cool little things that you could do if you wanted to look at doing multiple ships on each base and making battle groups out of it. So that's a fun thing, but I don't really think that that'll happen. But these are just some of the brainstorming ideas I have. Some of the ideas, and that's what makes this double crit, is we try to go and come up with crazy things. So another thing I thought would be interesting, how you have your ship cards in Star Wars Armada. Well, what if we had ship cards in Star Trek Armada that had certain different values? Like every ship has a warp core, right? Or I should say a power core, if it's not a warp core, because there might be some ships that don't have warp capability that still find themselves being in here, or whatever. But you'd have a warp core, and you'd have basically an energy rating. And every ship would, the bigger your warp core is, the more that you can do. And so the idea is, basically the idea is that the bigger your warp core, maybe the more expensive your ship is, and the more things you can do. So your movement, every click of movement you want to do is going to cost 1 of your power. So if your warp core value is 4, right, you could move up to 4 times, but you won't get any shots, right? Maybe every shot you want to take costs 1 power. Maybe you can spend a power for adding an extra die to an existing shot. Maybe you can spend a power to do a scan. And all these other things. So basically, your warp core gives you X amount of power points, and you just get to spend that on whatever kind of movement or attack options you want. And that's all tied to warp core value. And that's another way to make different ships really stand out, because you might have a battleship. You might have a really big, maybe a Romulan warbird that's huge and has a tremendous dice pool, but it has a warp core value of only 2, right? Perhaps. So I can move and shoot, but I'll only be moving 1. Or if I need to move twice, then I might not be able to shoot. So if I need to really get myself in a position and plan to shoot next turn, right, or something to that effect. And I think that could be a fun thing, and that might be one of the reasons you might put Geordi LaForge as your fleet commander, or your or fleet admiral or something to that effect, is that you might get a bonus, maybe as a once per turn, or a bonus, or maybe it's a permanent bonus. There's a lot of and you can do a lot of the same way that your commanders in Armada give your fleet a bonus. You do this, you can have the same thing for your fleet admiral in Star Trek Armada. So let's see. All right, let's see. I've got some folks here. Don't Star Trek shields usually encompass a single shield around the entire ship and go down all at once? No, not well. Honestly, it's one of those things that I'm not a Star Trek expert, but having looked at looking it up on Star Trek Wikipedia, or not Wikipedia, but Star Trek Wikipedia, and there are 6 specific shield zones, and one of the biggest inspirations I had was an old game called Star Trek Bridge Commander. That was basically Armada for me, back in the early 2000s. The gameplay was almost exactly like Armada, except you only controlled 1 ship. But you had different firing arcs, and you wanted to try to line people up. Usually that kind of, you're still in my front, but you're kind of off to the side. Now I can hit you with my forward phasers and my left phasers, and then also hit you with torpedoes too. It was the sweet spot. But you very specifically had individual shield zones that would be. Now the cool thing is you do have overall shield power, because you could reroute shields and send, you could kind of rebalance them. So, but the thing is, the reason there's an individual shield zone is because you can still punch through before the rest of the shields come back, and kind of the power is rebalanced. And so, and that's going to be an important part, because the shields might not be as high value as they are here, because my thought is that they would all rebalance automatically at the end of each round. So you really wanted to concentrate fire if you wanted to punch through. There's kind of one of those reasons when a ship gets shot in Star Trek, and they get shot by like a powerful weapon, but the shields aren't completely gone. Sometimes that first shot, even if it goes to shields, there's still explosions that happen inside the ship, and like that's why sometimes there's hull breaches before the shields are already down all the way, because you can still punch through while there's still power left to kind of heal the shield wall, right? So there are those specific zones. Again, I'm not a Star Trek super expert, but and also whatever works best for the plot. Sometimes they do fudge the things around a little bit just to tell a better story, and that's okay too. If you lose hull points on a side, you lose your guns on that side. Maybe. At a certain point, though, I mean, if we had hull for individual sides, then that would maybe be a little bit more complicated, because then you'd have a lot more. You'd have to track shields for every hull zone and hull for every hull zone. And then, that could be pretty tough. So I would rather just have hull value as a total, and then have crits. Like you could have a crit that says, weapons are down on this particular side. And so like you choose a zone and put like a weapons disabled on that ship, and maybe that they can't fire from that arc anymore until they, spend 5 engineering points to get rid of this card or something. In the shows, they have shield emitters along the hull, so the shields are in sections. Yeah. I mean, that seems pretty reasonable. But I think the whole idea of having shields on the top and bottom would really make the game stand out. I think that'd be really cool. And the idea of rolling your ship physically to where now your top is now really your left side and your bottom's really your right side is a great way. If your sides are getting low, then you roll and all of a sudden. Now, here's the cool thing. With the whole, this is one of my favorite parts, because 3D combat is certainly a thing. Space is 3-dimensional. We're flying, and we're not just on the sea, right? Where we can fly above each other and things like that. And games that try to do this, it usually ends up being kind of clunky or cumbersome. So I've never been a big fan. Like Battlestar Galactica tried to do this whole thing. You add extra pegs and like, I'm this high up now. And it's not always the easiest thing to do. So here's my thought. We do have 3D space, but we're not going to track it. The idea, hey, if you're over here and I'm over here, you know what? I can still shoot you, whether you're above or below me or whatever. It only really gets to a point when that shot would be obstructed. So my thought is, if you bump somebody, we're not going to have damage. There's no damage from bumps, although there can be. That you can attempt to ram somebody. That can be something you can attempt to do. Much like in Drop Fleet Commander, you can make a ramming attempt, and there could be consequences for that. But I don't want ramming to be a core strategy. It's kind of a desperation move. So if you bump somebody, instead of actually colliding with them, you actually go above them. Right? And so if you're in base contact with another ship that you bumped, you are now above them. And so you can shoot them, but you can only target their top shield. Now, if they have rolled, then their right shield is now their top shield. Or if they roll this way, then their left shield is now their top shield, right? And so that's kind of one of the things, that's one of the, so even if you're not rolling, those top and bottom shields still matter. Now, so you can only attack their top shield. But if they want to fire back before they move out, they can attack your bottom shield. So that's my idea for the six shield zones, because now those top and bottom shields have 2 alternate ways that they can help you. They help you when you're bumping or being bumped, or also when you are just trying to kind of disperse damage along your ship, so you can kind of roll to kind of help that stuff work. I think that'd be a fun way to do it, especially if you have hinges on the base, and that would be tricky to do. You don't have to do it with hinges, because you can put a token out or something like that to mark that the ship is rolled. But if you don't do it with hinges, then it's going to look dumb. Now you could do it with a ball magnet or something like that, maybe but that's but that's more of a homebrew thing. Rising Ape says, I like the idea of rolling the ship, maybe using a ball and socket joint where the flight stand meets the ship. Yeah, I mean, something like that, it can be tricky, though. Another way to do it that would be maybe a little easier is you, instead of just a single, like, right, the ships always have a peg in them, and the stands always have, like you have one of these, right? I'm trying to come up with a way to say it that doesn't sound like giggity, but basically, you have a cylinder section, and then you have the peg section, and it goes in there like that. Well, what you could do is, instead of having just one cylinder section, you could have it branch off 3 ways. So it could have a and this kind of cylinder section. So your peg can come in this way, or if you're rolling, you pull it out and stick it in this side. You could do that, and then it wouldn't require any joints. It'd just be a static piece. You might get a little more breakage of pegs if you do it that way, though, because there would be a lot more removing ships and stuff. So that's a little bit of a risk. That'd be a cheaper way to do it. And then if ships broke a little bit more often, then that'd be a bummer. I don't know. What I'd probably do to balance that is I'd have a bigger peg of thicker, and I'd have basically much larger pegs that are sturdier and less likely to break. Something to that effect. I don't know. I've thought about a lot of different aspects of this game. So, I also thought of, what if, as a possibility, there's a couple of different based things. What if instead of dice, we used cards, right? Card-based combat. And attacks just had a set amount of damage, I mean, it's a possibility, I think dice, I would rather dice, but still, I think it's worth thinking about. There's plenty of other games that do card-based combat where the combat isn't randomized. And I think it's still very fun in those games, especially when all right, I know your attack is a 5 damage attack that's coming at me, and my shields are 6, so I should be okay. But I don't know what tricks you've got up your sleeve. I don't know what tricks you've got up your sleeve. And I know you've already played the Picard maneuver once already this turn, so you can't play another Picard maneuver. But I don't know if you want to play and maybe the cards, like, once you use them, they're gone for the game. So. Like, I don't know if you want to spend your big damage cards now and then you won't have anything left for later, So there's some of that, or maybe there's some cards that, like, do damage to your ship because you drained your warp core too much or something to that effect. Matthias says, I feel like they're always just yelling out percentages and then the shields are down. Yeah, no, it does kind of feel like that, and that's kind of, to be fair. In Star Wars Armada, it's literally the exact same thing, right? If you had 4 shields in the front and, let's say, 2 shields on the rear and 1 shield on the side, okay, that would be 8 total shields. If you lost all 4 of your front shields, your shields would be at 50%, even though your front shield will be gone. Because as soon as you get a chance, you could run engineering and then kind of, redistribute shields a little bit, or regrow some shields or things like that. I think that's kind of what's happening. They're giving you an overall summary. The captain isn't micromanaging a ship as far as individual shield emitters. So the captain just needs to be kind of appraised of overall ship status. And so that's why they give that kind of assessment to the captain. So I think, but it's very easy. I can understand, it does sound like shields just have a certain amount, and it helps because there are some cases where they're just like, all right, shields are at 5%. We got to do something. Shields are down to 1%, Captain. The next hit and they'll be gone. It adds the dramatic value too. But as far as, like, specific geeking out for a tabletop game, I think it's important to point out that there are shield emitters, and we do have specific shield zones. And there's 6 of them, front, back, left, right, top, and bottom. So that for me, that'd be a big one. That would really help make a Star Trek Armada super, super cool. So another thing, we're talking about, like, ship cards a little bit. I want to show you guys an image. I'm gonna pull it up. I came up with this a while back. Let's see. let's see what I can do if I can pull this up. Because I'm going to show you guys like a sample ship card that I thought about, and I'm going to get it ready to go here. I probably should have done this ahead of time, but you know, we're having a good time. This whole live show is largely unscripted, so and that's okay. That's absolutely all right. It's absolutely all right. All right, here we go. All right, is this going to work? All right, here we go. So this is here's kind of like an example of how I imagine like a ship card would work, right? Oh, that's a little too big. There we go. So okay, here we go. So yeah, you can see some of my notes above there too. Double-sided. You have like the refit version on the back, kind of like Armada. You know, one maybe more expensive than the other, and plus, so many ships had. Look, there are ships that had lots of different versions, but it's a way to make unique ships. Also, you know, maybe if it's a common ship that has well-known named versions, like if it's a Galaxy class, you might do 2 separate ship cards, each of them double-sided. You can have like a prototype version one, a better one, and then or maybe there's 2 named versions. Like maybe you have the Enterprise on the backside of one, and you have the Yamato on the backside of another. And those are unique, right? And instead of making them shiny, maybe make them a matte finish. So they, there's so many times where I remember I'm making videos and stuff and trying to showcase my cards. Like where the light will reflect in the card and it doesn't look good, so you have to get it from just the right angle and stuff like that. And so it was just a different thought. So we have like a very small image for the ship card, but then of course with a name, like the different types of weapons, right? And a warp core value 5, right? So like that's how many energy points that it would have for its activation. Right, so it can move 4 and then shoot 1, or something to that, or it can move 3 and double arc, or it can move only 1, shoot 1, and spend the rest of the points on restoring shields that were lost. And I'd say you redistribute all of your shields, you rebalance at the end of the turn automatically. But then if you want to get any back, you have to spend engineer, you have to spend warp core points for that. I would give every ship a flagship ability, and what that means is if this ship is your flagship, here's what it does. So basically make every ship the potential to be a flagship, right? So again, like I might run the same fleet, but if I'm running Picard as my fleet commander, maybe I get something awesome. But if I put Picard on a Galaxy class, maybe that combination makes it even better. But if I put Picard on on the Stargazer or something like that, like some really cool shenanigans that could really work. So I think that would be a fun way to do stuff. And then we've got their other abilities right here. Like maybe these are just special abilities that this ship has. This is kind of this idea is inspired, I would say, by how Marvel Crisis Protocol has their stuff. And actually, I designed this before I saw their redesign where they're doing their characters slightly differently too. Because I've had this on the back burner for a while now. I've been waiting for an opportunity to use it. So. But yeah, so, different stuff like dynamic shielding or shield extension or irradiated shielding, right? So but whatever, the abilities don't really matter. The idea is that they'd have different abilities that they could do, and maybe they're actions, maybe they're passive things, maybe they're reactive things. But you list them all out there, and of course you have the fleet points down at the bottom, right? That's kind of how I would do the cards. Just have everything on one card. You don't have to worry about upgrades. You don't have to buy binders of stuff. You don't have to worry about am I going to put am I going to have transwarp or am I going to have what's that shielding? Dr. Rega's the shielding that they could go inside the sun with it, or metaphasic shielding on this ship, or am I going to have ablative armor on this shield? Am I going to have, special torpedo upgrades on this ship? Am I going to have the gel pack upgrade on this ship? We don't need all of that. That's just, how about the ships run the way they run? And, and, maybe most of the Federation ships will just have the one ship card double-sided. and then you double your ship cards for Klingon birds of prey and Klingon battle cruisers and stuff like that. You give them more different shield ship cards, so they have more different versions. So this way, they still have more gameplay variety. And there are a decent number of Klingon or Romulan ships too. There's other factions too that have quite a bit, but most of the recognizable stuff is definitely going to be from the Federation, and that's why I think it's important to set at the beginning. If you remember, I said that the setting here is that this is a battle simulator, right? Kind of like how they did the Kobayashi Maru. This is a war room, and it's a sophisticated simulation. And so it should be encouraged and entirely reasonable to see Federation versus Federation matchups, because it's a simulation. It's training. It's practice. And when militaries train, a lot of times they train against each other. That's how training tends to happen. You have your buddies playing the Op 4, and you're going out there and doing running exercises and things of that sort. So I think that the setting is important to frame all of that stuff. But yes, that's kind of my ideas on how a ship card would look. Metaphasic, yeah, thank you. I'd like to see some sort of Rising Ape says, I'd like to see some more of power balancing mechanic where you could strengthen your shields at a cost of damage or speed. Well, yeah, that's exactly how the warp core would work, because you decide where that power is going to go each turn, right? Maybe like if you have warp core value, if you have a core value of 5, it means at the beginning of your turn you get 5 points, and you spend them on what you need. And maybe ideally, you'd want to like move to shoot once, and spend your other 2 for like dice modification. Like maybe you get a reroll, or you get to add a die or something to that effect. Obviously, a rerolling and adding a die would be 2 different things. Maybe 2 power to add a die, 1 power just to reroll a die, right? So if you're already in the right spot and you don't have to move particularly far, then you're golden. And maybe smaller ships have a passive ability that says they get 2 movement for 1 power, right? Or maybe heavy, slow ships only get 1 movement, but for every 2 power, right? So maybe it costs them 2 power to get just the 1 movement, and that can be part of all the stuff that's written into the ship text, and that helps makes every ship kind of stand out and do its own thing, and that could be the same for other things too. Like maybe ships that aren't really known for battle can't just spend all of their energy on adding dice. If you got an Oberth class, it still has some phasers, but not that much. You don't want somebody like, running like a Geordie LaForge fleet with extra engineering for the whole fleet, running a whole bunch of Oberths, just adding extra dice to all their attacks, because that might be unbalanced. So maybe an Oberth or a ship that's really not known for weaponry has a thing, well, it costs you 1 extra power for every time you want to add a die to your attack pool. So now all of a sudden you're really not incentivized to do that. So be interesting. Inertia, like Battlestar Galactica, that was a tough one. It sounds cool on paper. I didn't like it on the tabletop. And one of the reasons I didn't like the way Battlestar Galactica did it is it made sense thematically, but it didn't, at the end of the day, it didn't add a fun factor to the game for me. It just didn't do it. Just didn't do it. So, yeah. So, I don't know. Those are some of my ideas for a Star Trek Armada. I've certainly got more specifics on different things. I've like how much each power could do for this, and an alternate rule set, or maybe even a core rule set where the purpose of the game is just to kill the enemy flagship. Like if I kill your flagship, like they make it a little more like chess, perhaps. And obviously that would be maybe, well, I don't know about obviously, but maybe that's just one objective. Maybe there's, maybe you can play objectives, and maybe a commonly taken objective is just kill the flagship. Like, oh, this game is just going to be a death match. Oh, this game is going to be, let's get to the station and, let's protect the station. Oh, this game is going to be, let's escape through the wormhole, and so on and so forth. So you could still have objective cards like you do in other games. But I like the idea of flagships, offering some additional benefit beyond just the points of killing a flagship and also taking out their commander and then their fleet losing that ability. I like the idea that a lot of objectives would give bonus points to to either attacks on the flagship or things like that. So a big part, I think, of the core gameplay should be to protect the flagship, and I think that would also make the game feel a little different than other stuff, because I want there to be more consequences for losing your flagship and losing your commander beyond just, oh well, they died, With the possibility of a Babylon 5 reboot, I think that it would be a better setting than Star Trek. I need to watch Babylon 5. I have never watched Babylon 5, and I have planned to for a long time. I think I'm going to have to reprioritize that, and I will get back to you guys. I will definitely watch Babylon 5. Definitely will. All right, guys. Well, I think that's going to do it. I'm going to wrap things up for today. I want to thank you guys for hanging out with me today. It has been a fun time. Be sure, big thanks to Luxury Playstyle for being a sponsor of the channel. Be sure to check them out and head over to luxuryplaystyle.com. Use code Crabbok VIP. Get yourself some fantastic full metal tokens for games like X-Wing, Arkham, Keyforge, and more. We also have some Legion tokens coming out very, very soon. They're going to be out next month. So stay tuned for that, and we'll be giving you more previews of those when they become available. All right, that's going to do it for today. I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and big thanks to my patrons. You guys are absolutely amazing and help make this all possible. So thank you for your continued support, and always remember, don't go skinny dipping in a pond where there are piranhas.